Making a biodigester out of any container is as easy as I love you, the ASL sign. So we have the design that we need for building our biodigester right here in our hand, from the tips of our fingers down to our elbows. Shortest finger, overflow or outlet. Tallest finger is gas. And then the pinky finger, that is the feeding tube. And I'm going to show you how to measure. Looking at the inside of this digester, you can see that two of these tubes go all the way down to the bottom. So this one right here, the widest one that's 3 inches wide, is the feeding tube. And then this one is the overflow. And we measure these with our I love you sign, right? So the feeding tube, you drop this tube down into the tank before placing in the uniseal for measuring, all the way down to the bottom, and you're going to know where to cut it based on the distance from the elbow at the top of the tank to approximately the top of this tube. So from your elbow to the top of the pinky is approximately the height of the feeding tube. So we think of our thumb as being short, and the overflow, we want that to be as short as possible. So I like to drop that tube into the tank, and I cut it just short enough right here so that I can have enough room to get this T on top of this 2-inch pipe. And last, over here, is the gas line. So that is the longest finger, which is the pointer, and I measure that from the top of the tank to the top of my finger right here, like that. So as long as my elbow goes from the bottom of the tube to where the end of the bushing is, then I know I have enough height for the gas line. So let's get started. Let's cut some 1/2-inch PVC. For the gas line, I like the PVC lengths for the 1/2 inch to be approximately 2.5 inches. So I like to just use my thumb as a measuring tool, and I'll do 1 and 2. So this is about 2.5 right here. I'm going to take my Sharpie and mark that so I can get ready to cut. These are PVC cutters. You need to use these with extreme care because they do have a hefty, sharp blade. I'm going to unlock the safety, and you open the blade by pressing on that button, and I'm going to go ahead and cut. I put this all the way back against the blade, and I crank this shut. A little bit of strength here is needed. And there's my piece, and I lock my cutters again. I'm going to assemble the gas line. This right here is 2-inch PVC, schedule 40. This is a 2-inch to 1.5-inch adapter, and then right here on the top is 1.5-inch to 1/2-inch bushing. Here is an adapter that will work. You don't have to use this exact setup as long as you get down from like 2 inches to 1/2 inch. This is 1/2 inch slip. It's going to go right in here. I usually don't glue this until I have placed the biodigester because I want this gas line to swivel until I make the final decision about where I want this biodigester placed. And once I've made that choice, then I'm going to glue it. So for now, I'm not gluing anything, just for the sake of demonstration. Here is a 3.5-inch long piece of 1/2-inch PVC that goes here, and there's the 1/2-inch ball valve, and here's another 1/2-inch piece of PVC, 1/2-inch slip to 1/2-inch threaded. And right here is already the threaded adapter from 1/2-inch male threaded to 3/8 inch barb. I already used threading tape on it and threaded this up previously. and then that goes in here. So this is the completed gas line. The last piece I put on the gas line is this 2-inch slip to 2-inch male threaded adapter. I would typically put threading tape on this before screwing this into the adapter, but this piece would get glued right here at the bottom. And this is the completed gas line. For my biodigester build, this is actually the most tricky and potentially dangerous part of my build, in which I'm going to be handling these hole saws. So whenever I handle the hole saws, I always use protective gloves. These are a Kevlar based product that is a fabric that washes easily, and also it has nice grips on it too, which is very handy for handling these sharp blades, because as you can see, they are a beast. And put my gloves on anytime I'm going to be handling these blades, because you can see how sharp these are. I've seen these do a lot of damage to somebody's thumb at one point, you know, when it was not handled properly. And this is a 4-inch hole saw, and it's meant to cut the hole for a 3-inch uniseal. So 4-inch hole saw to 3-inch uniseal. And this right here is a 3-inch hole saw, and it is used for cutting a hole for a 2-inch uniseal. You can see how these line up. And what I'm going to do is show you how I like to get these drills ready with these bits. And so I, get the drill all the way open, and I had it in reverse, and I'm very careful not to be touching the end of this bit, and I'm going to put it on forward, and I'm holding this part right here, waiting for it to catch. There we go. And so now my bit is on and it's secure, and I am ready to drill. When I'm done drilling, I am going to put this drill back into reverse. I'm going to hold this low to the table. I've got a good grip here, and off comes my bit, nice and safe. So you're probably wondering, how did I get such a nasty tear in my glove? It was actually not from this bit, but it is from this bit right here. So if you are using a bit like this on this drill, it is actually not a good thing to be wearing these gloves, because this can actually get caught in the glove, twist the fabric, and cause a nasty cut. So these gloves are great for using hole saws, but not so great for using this type of a bit. This is the bottom of the feeding tube that I've cut. As you can see, it is almost like a 45-degree angle, and then half of the tube is cut here, so it's sort of like a scoop. And the purpose of the scoop is that this is going to be resting on the bottom of the barrel or the tank to give it stability, as well as having plenty of room for the food to be flowing out. So whenever I cut a piece of PVC that I'm going to be sliding through a uniseal, it is very important that I take the time to be feeling for any rough edges, and I'm going to be sanding those edges down so that everything is nice and smooth. So the sanding process is really important, because if I don't sand, this is what could happen to my uniseal. As you can see, this uniseal has tears in it and is sort of shredded, and that is not good, because then you are going to get a gas leak. So once the pipe is nice and smooth, I am then going to use silicone on a good uniseal to do a nice thick bead around the outside of this uniseal that will then get popped into the tank that I had pre-cut a hole for. My favorite drilling technique is to start with the drill forward first, and I'm going to pull back on the trigger and I'm going to hold it here, careful not to be blocking the vents, and I'm going to get that pilot bit in. So the pilot goes in first, and then it does tend to catch, so I like to put it in reverse and just let it cruise its way through in reverse. So again, I'll show you. It's forward for getting this, the pilot bit in. I get that pilot bit in, and then I put it into reverse. The uniseals, once they are silicone, they pop in like this. They make a snapping sound. Again, nice flat surface, and then right here, flat surface, and that pops in too. So this sets up to explain what the 3 ports are here. So this right here, I always look on these barrels, which one has the finest threads, and the one with the finest threads is the one that I'm going to put the gas line through, because this 2-inch thread here works very well to just screw in nice and flush here, nice and secure. And then closest to the gas is the overflow, because I want to keep this as far away as possible from the feeding tube. And the feeding tube is always usually going to be this other port over here, because there is already a hole in the tank. And so because there's already a penetration there, it just makes sense to drill through that hole and make a bigger hole. All right, so we have our 3 holes in our tank. We have the 3-inch pipe with the 3-inch uniseal for feeding, 2-inch uniseal with 2-inch pipe for overflow, and then we have our threaded that we're going to use for the gas. I'm going to put this feeding pipe down through this uniseal. So what I'm looking for is where the opening is, and what I want to do is mark at the top of this feeding tube where that opening is, so I can remember later, because I want the opening of the feeding tube to be faced towards the inside of this tank. So it's going to face in like that. So the food's going to be flowing into the digester and not get clumped along the wall of the biodigester. It is very helpful when sliding plastic PVC through this rubber uniseal, because it does tend to stick, is to use a lubricant, and that is rubbing alcohol. Okay, so I just simply apply it on here. Get it open. Alright, so I want to get the rubbing alcohol all on the inside of the uniseal and right along where this edge is, because this right here is where it's going to get caught. And I like to be on a stepping stool so that, you know, at least I am like above waist height from the tank, so that I can get some more motion going. And it also helps me to get a little higher so I can put my knee on it. And to pop this thing through, you do need to stir it, because if you push straight down, there is a good possibility that you can actually pop the uniseal through the hole, which is what we don't want to do. And we're still turning. Oh, you can't talk. We're still turning and pushing and working our way past that little lip I was talking about. Okay, I made some more progress. I've got this through the uniseal, and this right here is facing towards the middle of the biodigester. I'm going to apply some more rubbing alcohol, more lubricant, and I'm going to work on pushing this through. This one's a little tricky because obviously this is a cutaway biodigester for demonstration, so this is caving a little bit, but I just really wanted you to see like how this pushing and turning action like helps to get the tube through. And we got it in. So the tube goes all the way to the bottom, and there is the scoop, and that is facing to the inside of the tank. With any domed biodigester that I make that is made out of containers such as this barrel, an IBC tank, or even a septic tank, I always like to add surface area to the inside. And the reason why is this one fault of the design, which is that you have the feeding tube right here, and the feeding tube is facing out to the inside of the tank, and then right over here, this is the overflow where the finished fertilizer comes out. Now you can see there's a hole right here in the middle of this tube, and I always have this facing to the outside of the tank because what I'm trying to do is to create as much space as possible between the raw materials that come in here and then the finished fertilizer, which is going to come out here. And so I compensate by adding the surface area. So this could be like gravel, or you could have a laundry bag with little bottle caps in it with a weight to kind of keep it in the midsection, because unlike the plug and flow systems in which it's like a big tube and it's traveling through the tube over time, everything in here sort of has more opportunity for getting mixed together. So you want to create more homes for your microbes so that you can digest more efficiently. When building the biodigester, I always want to put my surface area in first before I put in my pipes, because you're putting them in through these holes that are either 3 inches or 4 inches. So obviously the 4-inch hole is ideal, and that's the one the feeding pipe goes in. You can't put the gravel through if the feeding pipe is already in. And once you get the gravel in, you're going to swirl the tank around to kind of spread it out. And then, you know, it's a good time to add the manure for these little barrel biodigesters, because you can pour it through one of these holes that you still have open where you don't have a tube. And you're going to put in, what I like is, this is pretend, 1 full bucket of wet manure into this biodigester in order to inoculate it. There you go. Now that my biodigester is inoculated with manure, I put in the overflow pipe right here, which you can see the hole for the overflow, making sure that that hole is facing the outside wall of the biodigester. And sometimes it's tricky to get this all the way down to the bottom because you do have manure here in the tank as well as the gravel, and so giving it a little shake helps to get it into place. Now that I got the feeding tube in, I have put in the overflow. I had marked it right here so I could see where the hole was, because I want this tube facing towards the outside. And then I have my T. I always use a T because the top of the T is open, which will prevent a bell siphon from happening if there was gas to build up in pressure on the inside of this tank. So I put on the T, and then I have some more 2-inch pipe with an elbow, so that as the digester is fed, it is equal in and equal out, coming out through the overflow. And this threaded 2-inch adapter with slip. This is for our gas line that we built, and that goes on here. This does get glued. So with the gas line, what's important is that the top of the gas line right here, I don't glue that until I am finished, because I always want that to be in the direction of where I am going to be using the stove.